Kunja Vihari Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Dari Gopi Jana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanan Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Gopi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Yamuna Tira Vanacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Sata Shishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Adwaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopna Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Navadvipam ki jai, Gangamai ki jai, Yamunamai ki jai, Tulsi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrindi ki jai, Gaura Premananda, Hari Hari Bolo. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shishi Guru and Garanga and His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yeah. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in the 10th canto, chapter 45, which is Krishna rescues his teacher, and we're on text 14. So, Mai Britya Upasane Bhavato Vibhudaidaya Balim Haranti Avanataha Kim Utanye Naradipaha Mai Britya Upasane Bhavato Vibhuddhadaya Balim Harantya Vanata Kim Utanye Naradipaha Mai Britya Upasane Bhavato Vibhuddhadaya Balim Harantya Vanata Kim Utanye Naradipaha Mai Britya Upasane Bhavato Vibhuddhadaya Balim Harantya Vanata Kim Utanye Naradipaha. Devotees? Mai Britya Upasane Vibhuddhadaya. Anybody? Mai Pritya Upasine Bhavato Vibhuddhadaya Balim Harantya Vanata Kimuyantanye Rapidada. Go to the word for word. Mai, when I, Britye, as a servant, Upasane, am present, in attendance, Bhavataha, to you, Vibhuddha, the demigods, Adayaha, and so on, Balim, tribute. Haranti will bring avanataha, bowed down in humility. Kim uta, what then to speak of? Anye, other. Nara, of men. Adipaha, rulers. So translation, since I am present in your entourage as your personal attendant, all the demigods and other exalted personalities will come with heads bowed to offer you tribute. What then to speak of the rulers of men? So we can repeat, since I am present in your entourage as your personal attendant, all the demigods and other exalted personalities will come with heads bowed to offer you tribute. What then to speak of the rulers of men? So purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna again assures Ugrasena that he should confidently take the throne. This is a really short purport, but what really stood out for me in first obeisance is Amagyana Timirandasha Gnanjana Shalakya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna So what stood out for me was in this verse and reading this, the first thing that popped out to me was humility. And it's something that obviously, as previously being a materialist, speaking for myself, and still having material tendencies because I'm in the process of trying to become Krishna conscious, I constantly think of that. And one of the things that Bhakti Tirtha Swami had said was that, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less often. And so, and then something else that he said that I also thought was significant, and this stands out very strong, and I think it really relates to the verse today, is in speaking about humility, that it's not just this passive, weak state. It's actually, humility requires a lot of strength. And as you're seeing here, Krishna is encouraging King Ugrasena, saying, you are qualified to sit. I'm in your entourage. I've got your back. You will do the right thing, and I've got your back covered. And so same thing, like the thing that popped up to my mind about this whole thing too was like Arjuna, on the battlefield and, doing the things that he needed to do, including killing family and, his guru, all these apparently heinous things, but doing it because he had, Krishna had his back and was giving him this instruction that this is the right thing to do. And so, that's something that Bhakti Tirtha Swami had shared, was that, humility is, again, it requires a lot of strength. It's not this passive thing, because it takes a lot of strength and a lot of integrity to do what Krishna wants you to do what the spiritual master instructs you to do. Because for the most part, we're going against the grain in practicing Krishna consciousness. And in today's society, in this materialistic world, we're going against the grain. We're going against the current and pushing back. And everybody's walking this way and we're walking that way. And that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of humility, because sometimes you have to say and do things that are not comfortable for other people, right? And So I was thinking about that in this verse, and I'll read some of the Acharya commentaries. If I can get back there, because I scrolled a little bit forward, to share a little bit of what they shared about this particular text, and then we'll go from there. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur shared that if Ugrasena were to object and say that he did not have the power to be the king, Krishna says, if I am engaged as your servant, then all the devatas will also serve you. And then Jivaka Swami comments, he shows Ugrasena's power to command. At his command, the devatas offer tribute with heads bowed in devotion. Avantataha. Though by Yayati's curse the Yadus should not rule, while I remain as your servant, you may give orders to the devatas, what to speak of kings. Another version has Harishanti will offer instead of Haranti. Anye indicates other rulers who are inferior or other kings. So in other words, Krishna knows what he's doing. And, he's trying very much to encourage Ugrasena to utilize, because obviously Krishna wouldn't put him in that position if he wasn't Krishna conscious, to take a leadership position. And that's something else that I was thinking of, is that, it takes humility to lead in a way that you are empathic and compassionate towards a misdirected society, as Prabhupada said, and as a suffering society. It takes that compassion and seeing with equal vision every single living entity, but at the same time correcting them so that they don't continue to end up in this cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. And that's something that's shared in the Bhagavad Gita, is that it's really, important that we understand the hellishness of birth, death, old age, and disease, right? And so it takes a lot of compassion, but again, it takes in a leadership position, it takes a lot of humility, because if you do, and I think my spiritual master may have been mentioning this either Sunday or yesterday when he was giving class, about how it's so easy when you get into a position of power to let that go to your head, right? And so humility is absolutely required. And as long as you understand that you're the servant of the servant of the servant, and that you're doing this because it's a service, and you're doing it because it's what the spiritual master wants, and you're doing it because this is what Krishna wants, that takes, again, a lot of courage and a lot of humility to do. And so, Ugrasena is in this position, but Krishna's put him there and he trusted. I also think of the same, like on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and somehow, that we can doubt Krishna's, instructions, or doubt the spiritual master's instructions when he told Yudhisthira to kill the elephant, and in order to confuse Drona, thinking that it was his son, because they had the same name. The elephant and his son had the same name, and he did that to confuse them. And so Yudhisthira had a lot of doubt about, lying, and saying that this elephant died versus the son died, and he didn't want to do it. But Krishna was giving this instruction, and so again, it takes a lot of courage to be humble, because doing what Krishna wants and the spiritual master wants require humility, and to follow through with that, again, takes a lot of courage. So I thought I would go through the Bhagavad Gita, because it talks about humility, and it talks about what the definition is, it talks about the necessity of, and then it also gives the example of a person situated in humility. So I thought I would share, a few of those things from Prabhupada, and how he's giving us these instructions to develop this humility, and never lose sight of compassion, never lose sight of love for all the living entities, right? And again, that's, what being, a guru and a spiritual master. And the other thing I was thinking about is how in taking up Krishna consciousness, um, we're all becoming leaders. We're all leaders because we're all trying to set the example for society. We're all trying to set the example to encourage others to become Krishna conscious. And again, that takes a lot of courage and it takes being a leader. So we're all leaders. Every single one of us taking up this Krishna conscious movement have become leaders for Srila Prabhupada. And maybe we're not on the front lines and out doing, major preaching and book distribution, but whatever we're doing is in support of that effort. We're a whole army of Sankirtan, Kirtaniyas, of this Sankirtan movement and spreading the love of Krishna consciousness. And, it takes guts, to go against the current. It takes guts to, say, no, think about this. So in chapter 13, there's a verse. It's actually 4 verses, 8 through 12. It's really a famous set of verses, but it talks about all these different things that are, what Krishna declares to be knowledge. And of course, one of those is humility. And so what Prabhupada shares in the purport is that humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge who knows that he is not this body, anything, honor or dishonor, pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following the religious principles and then wants to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can judge by these items, and this is the whole list that these verses are in chapter 13, verses 8 through 12. But again, it's, this misunderstanding or this thinking that we're the body and thinking that we want to be patted on the back and giving gratification. So Prabhupada is showing us, what humility means is not to be anxious to have that, and that profit, adoration, and distinction. And as living entities and sentient beings, it's not, though, that we don't need encouragement. It's not that we don't need to know that we're doing the right thing or to be given positive feedback for the contributions that we're making to be encouraged. So it's important to encourage those things. But, there's a very subtle line of, wanting that profit, adoration, and distinction. And so we have to be super careful, about remaining humble and, being tolerant of all these different things. And so if we go a little bit, and this is a really lengthy, if you get a chance to read it, it's chapter 13, 8 through 12, really lengthy purport going through all these different aspects of knowledge of what Krishna consciousness, the characteristics of, and definition of Krishna consciousness, like humility, pridelessness, nonviolence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, all these different things. It's a wonderful read, right? And so later at the very, towards the end of the purport, Prabhupada shares that beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase beginning from the ground floor going up to the top floor. Now, on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second floor, third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at a lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is truly not possible. So again, to keep this humility in our heart, and in our consciousness, and referring to it and going back to it, testing ourselves, like Prabhupada said, testing ourselves to see if we're actually truly humble and not doing it for some personal motivation. So, in other words, being introspective. You have to be introspective enough to ask yourself questions about yourself and what your motives are around any activity that you're doing. Because otherwise, we're really not going to reach that top floor of becoming Krishna conscious. You know, Krishna just doesn't tolerate, lack of humility. And one of these old Indian movies was showing Narada Muni, and Narada Muni was somebody needed to connect with Krishna, to connect with Krishna, and so Narada Muni was going around, and he's really cute because he has this little like Sika that's standing up with a little light on top of it. It's kind of funny, but he's going around, and so this person needs to connect with Krishna, and he says, "Well, I know where Krishna is. I'll go get him, no problem." And you could tell that he was a little bit puffed up, and so he goes seeking around the universe, and he's like, "Well, I know where he is. What's going on?" And he couldn't get there, and it was, and eventually he realizes it's because of his pride that Krishna cut off that knowledge of being able to connect with him, even himself, right? So again, this, and that just always sticks in my mind, as like a visual, because I'm a very visual person, and so having that visual, it's just reminds me quite often of what humility kind of looks like in action, that Krishna will, cut us off, like it in Prabhupada shares that, it's clearly stated, without humility, understanding is truly not possible. So we have to remember that, right? And then what humility is. And sometimes humility is being a very soft person, not necessarily weak or, meek and passive, but, being willing to hear others. I was at my niece's graduation recently, and I think it was a lady who was the marketing manager for TikTok for the U.S., and she was giving one of the speeches at my niece's graduation, and one of the things she said, that in encouraging these young graduates, was there's two things that you should do when you go out into the world, and that is be authentic to yourself and make sure that others are heard. And I thought that was so important, in relationship to humility. It's like, don't sacrifice yourself and who you are. Be authentic to yourself. Make no compromises. Set boundaries. Do whatever you need to do with that. And at the same time, make sure that others are heard. And what that means is being humble enough that you don't sacrifice your own self-identity, but at the same time, you allow others their identity and to be heard for what they have to share, right? Because then there can be a conversation. If it's just you being authentic and cutting other people off, then there's not going to be a back and forth and understanding, right? So again, and then that, to me, that was the element of humility, because it takes humility to be able to hear others, right? It's such a valuable lesson. And so Srila Prabhupada also shares, that being the necessity of what it also looks like, what the person looks like. And this came to me as I was sharing earlier, is text 18 and 5. Chapter 5 is the humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision a learned and gentle brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. And it says, that's the example, as it gives in the index in the back, is the example of a person situated in humility. And I thought that was really interesting, because you think about it, that's what real humility is having that vision that, a humble sage is someone who, in Krishna consciousness, who sees everybody as part and parcel of Krishna, and who doesn't see, his own family as his only family. He understands, when he's in pure Krishna consciousness, that everybody's in Krishna's family, right? And that tied back into this whole thing that this lady, was sharing, is that yes, it's important to be authentic, but it's also needed, to be able to hear others and allow their voice to have some value. um, and that's what real knowledge is, because tied into, humility and doing what Krishna wants, going against the grain, maybe saying what's not comfortable to those people, but at the same time, letting them know that they're valuable, and remaining compassionate, is also part of humility. Is understanding that what that vision of everybody being connected, all living entities being connected to Krishna, it's just so important. Um, because when we have that vision, then we truly understand that if you're my brother, if you're my father, if you're my sister, and if you are part and parcel of Krishna, then my responsibility is to figure out how I can best serve you, right? Um, Something that pops into my mind is when I worked at University of Chapel Hill in the provost office, and worked in the finance department for the university, finance and HR, kind of an overbranching office. And it was a small office, but still, one of the things that I understood at some point as I was practicing my Krishna consciousness and trying to figure out how to have a material job and still be a spiritualist was having the realization that I'm a servant. So if I'm there, my job is to facilitate their jobs as much as possible, to support them, because I was in a administrative job, um, in a lower position. And so my I felt like, in order for me to be satisfied, it was really necessary for me to understand that I was a servant of the servant of the servant, and no matter what circumstance I was in. And so in that office, what I tried to do is I tried to give them all the support that they needed, and so that they felt that support and they could see the significance of what it's like to be a servant, like to take that mood, because that requires humility, to serve somebody else versus, managing somebody else, right? It's easy to manage and tell other people what to do. Well, it's maybe not easy, because not everybody wants to do what you tell them to do. But, and out of that, I feel like one of the results, like, for example, when I left the company to come do full-time service at the temple, was, which is pretty traditional, is they gave a going away party, right? And so one of the things that the head of the department asked me in front of all these people, so tell everybody what you're going to do. And I was coming to devotional service full time, and I'm like, oh, this is a big pop quiz. I was not expecting that. But, I felt like, okay, I've had this relationship, you know, he's comfortable enough to ask me. He's not quite sure exactly what I'm going to do, and nobody else is. So I explained to them everything that I was going to do, as far as at that time I was going to be doing head pujari work, so managing the schedule and doing all these other things, and doing the finance. And, so I went into all the detail of sharing all of that. And I had a lot of people come up after me and, say, be careful, because, I know when you do full-time service, then, it can be, overwhelming, and they can start loading everything onto you, but that it's a little bit different. But anyway, there were also people that were coming up and asking me about Krishna consciousness and asking me about the process. And so, again, there's this opportunity when we take on this mood of service. People are going, because in that subtle humility, and I'm not saying that I'm like fully humble, but I could see the effect of trying to be a servant of the servant of the servant helps people be more open to hearing, right? And that it helps people, it helps give a sense of trust, because they know that you're authentically caring about what their needs are, and you're trying to fulfill those needs to help facilitate their work. And so it's just, really helpful and personal, actually, really. It's very personal when you take on the mood of a servant. And for Krishna, you know, you do it out of love, right? And so in that situation or any situation that we might be in, we're trying to do it, you know, to show them what love of Krishna is. Love of Krishna is caring about them because they're part and parcel of Krishna. Um, so I wanted to also share a couple of more things that Prabhupada shared related to this um, humility. And this is in text 3 of chapter 16, which is also um, the characteristics of godly men endowed with divine nature. So he's sharing that, and one of them is humility. Humility is also one of the qualifications of of a transcendentally situated person. And out of sheer humility, the sannyasi goes from door to door, not exactly for the purpose of begging, but to see the householders and awaken them to Krishna consciousness. This is the duty of a sannyasi. He is actually advanced and so ordered by his spiritual master that he should preach Krishna consciousness with logic and understanding. And if one is not so advanced, he should not accept the renounced order. But even if one has accepted the renounced order of life without sufficient knowledge, he should engage himself fully in hearing from a bona fide spiritual master to cultivate knowledge. But, you know, again, this humility is one of the qualifications, and not just for sannyas, but it is, you know, in that example of sannyas, is that he's not exactly going to beg. He's not exactly going just to get food. He's going to help other living entities. And it takes a lot of courage. You know, it takes a lot of gumption to, you know, to preach and to get out there and do book distribution on the streets, because you encounter so many different people with so many different attitudes, some of them angry, some of them frustrated, you know, some of them do, you know, will spit at you. I mean, there's just, you know, I mean, if you hear some of the book stories, but then of course mixed in with that are these enlivening stories about the impact of book distribution and some of these amazing stories that these, you know, people that are going out and doing this, and this includes the sannyasi, you know, of going out into uncharted territory, not really knowing what to expect, you know. And so again, it takes a lot of courage to be humble and a lot of humility to do, you know, to do that. And so, you know, it's just, you know, incumbent upon us, you know, to think of that. There's another. I had another verse that I was thinking about. But anyway, you know, again, you know, for me, it just stood out like, you know, King Ugrasena is in this position. So think about this too, is that we're, you know, preachers of Krishna conscious because we're practicing, and therefore having this knowledge, we're obligated to share it. But that doesn't mean, you know, we have to be on the front lines. If we can do that, that's wonderful and that's great. But we can share at whatever level we're at as much as we can with the people, you know, that we come in contact, you know, in whatever way we can. So we're all preachers. And like Ugrasena and like Arjuna, Krishna has our back. He's got us covered, you know. He's you know, because we've taken up this Krishna consciousness, because we're trying the best. I was talking to my sister about this the other day, you know, because, you know, she understands that not everything is going to go perfectly all the time. And I said, but the thing is, you know, I try not to make judgments about people's actions or activities because we've checked into the hospital, right? We've admitted that we're sick, you know, with material consciousness, and we've taken the humility and the courage to practice Krishna consciousness to try to better ourselves, to try to get rid of that material consciousness, and to try to become fully Krishna conscious. And so it's so you don't go in and you know, criticize people that have actually taken enough introspection to take up this process of Krishna consciousness, to heal themselves and to become better. So Again, and I was trying to explain to her that, Krishna puts us in so many different circumstances to help us become stronger, right? And sometimes that may be an interpersonal conflict. Sometimes that may be a physical challenge or a mental challenge. We may have problems with the body, or the mind. Adhyatmik, adhidaiva, adhibodhik. We have all these different challenges. But because we've taken up Krishna consciousness, it's all Krishna's arrangement to help us become stronger, to get closer and closer and closer to us, to push us closer to Him, because that's where true shelter is, that's where true safety is. And when we start to understand that, when we start to understand that Krishna's got our back, He's got us covered, you know, that gives us faith. And that faith gives us courage to take another step forward, and gives us the courage to be more and more humble. And, because it requires, humility to be faithful and to trust that what Krishna's saying is actually true, and to do what he says to do. It takes a lot of courage to do that, and humility. It's all mixed in there. So again, that's what I was inspired by, this verse, where those two things is that, one, Krishna's got our back. He loves us unconditionally. And he'll always encourage us in the way we may not, at least speaking for myself, get direct conversation with him, but we do get realization, and that is his confirmation and conversation with us. Those realizations are confirmation and conversation with us, so often. I mean, I share that, and I know we've all had those experiences, but one of my favorite, when I was early in my practice of Krishna conscious, and I was trying to work everything out in my mind, I would be walking up and down the driveway and chanting, and then a thought would come into my mind, and then I wasn't sure if the motive or, the idea was correct. But many times I would look down and I would find a rock that was in the shape of a heart, and I started to collect all of those. So I was like, yes, confirmation. I need confirmation that I'm doing the right thing. But that was his way of reciprocating with me. And there was something that happened recently, but I can't remember exactly what it is. But that's Krishna's, confirmation, that we're doing the right thing, and to give us encouragement. Those are what realizations, those are our conversations, with Krishna, to let us know that we're doing the right thing and that we're going in the right direction. And that's what he's doing with Ugrasena. He's saying, with me and your entourage, the demigods are going to come bow to you. You've got this covered. Don't worry about it. I've got your back. And that's what he's saying to us. And at the same time, to keep our humility, because that is one of the challenges in Krishna consciousness, or one of the anartas, is, getting puffed up from getting positive feedback. Like, and, people telling you, oh, you're advancing this much, and, getting that, my brain's not working fast enough, but, by getting those positive feedbacks or encouragement or profit or adoration for the work we do as we advance, can also bring us down, right? Is, something that we have to be really careful about. So it's a huge balancing act. But the good thing is, again, Krishna's got, that safety net built under us. So he will make arrangements so that we do stay humble, but he will also encourage us, through our realizations, in the practice of Krishna consciousness. So I'm not sure that I have a whole lot. I don't know if anybody has any questions or any thoughts. Your own personal experiences, just trust and understand that Krishna has your back, and, take courage in taking leadership positions, no matter how big or small, because taking up Krishna consciousness is a leadership position in this particular material society. So, take courage, and, keep that humility as you go, out into your life and share this Krishna consciousness, knowing, and doing so by keeping the empathy in your heart of understanding that most of the reason why, people. Ki Jai.
Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Enam Kanvandam Maravindanalayataptam Varhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundaranam Kandar Agom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Anganiyasa Sakalem Priya Priti Manti Vasyan Divan Dikayanti Chiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami 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 Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham
Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanande Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivasesha Sanyavadi Ashtachadisattarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivasesha Sanyavadi Ashtachadisattarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Krishna Chaitanya, Gadadhar Shivaswati, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha, Goloka Nanda Radha, Goloka Nanda Radhe. Jaya Radha, Goloka Nanda Radha, Goloka Nanda Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Hey, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. Jaya Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Bhaktivedanta. Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur. ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada. Gora Premanandi.
सर्वशक्ति श्रता पिता नियमते समरेण काला पीता ऋषि तव कृपा भगवान मापि दुर्दैव मानुरागा शरणपि सुनीचेन करोड़पि सुस्यनाम अमानेन मानधेन कीर्तनया सदा हरि नाद